Hello and welcome to the ASB Investment Podcast, the show that keeps you up to date on the markets and helps you make smart choices with your investments. These are entirely our own views and that of our guests. It's not investment advice, but we know plenty of experts at ASB that will be happy to chat if you need. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the ASB Investment Podcast, where we dive into smarter financial choices for every stage of life. I'm your host, as always, Nigel Grant, and today we're talking about investing through your 40s, a crucial decade that can shape how comfortable and confident your retirement years will be. So maybe you're just starting out with investing, or maybe you've been in the game for a while, but I'm wondering, is your current strategy still making sense? Is anything I'm doing making sense towards that big goal at maybe around 65? Either way, this episode's for you. But it's also just not about retirement. The 40s are a crucial decade where work, potentially kids, if you've made that choice, mortgage, if you've made that choice, and wider family obligations all stack up and put pressure on finances. To help unpack this, I'm joined by Ngaire Angus, our Head of Wealth Distribution at ASB. Welcome, Ngaire. How are you?
Oh, kia ora, Nigel. I'm very well, thank you.
And for our listeners, can you just give us a brief intro in terms of, what do you do at ASB, how long you've been there, and what does a Head of Wealth Distribution do?
Right. So at ASB, I lead our wealth distribution team, and that means that I get to work with our incredible advisors, financial advisors, who we call wealth managers, and they support our customers to grow, protect, and enjoy their wealth. I love seeing the transformation when people realise investing isn't just for other people, and it's for everyone, and it's for right now. So we focus on making financial wellbeing part of your whole life picture. Not just the dollars and cents, but how your money supports your goals, your whānau, your lifestyle, and your future.
And so, how long you've been at ASB for quite a while, right?
Yeah,
yeah. And so, but that's a good thing. So you've been through a range of roles. But how long have you been at ASB?
Well, yeah, I am definitely part of the furniture. I think it's 27 years altogether.
27 years?
Yeah, over two separate bursts.
Yes.
And, I've had experience across lots of our personal banking and commercial private banking roles, and also a little bit around product development and customer experience. And I've been working in the wealth team now for 2.5 years. And
just one final thing on your background. What role did you start at ASB?
Oh, yeah. So I was a customer service officer, aka teller.
Yes.
At the ASB Bank in Glenfield.
Glenfield Mall?
No, we're going old school. We are talking about the old Glenfield branch, the OG branch, on Glenfield Road in the mid-90s.
Oh, you didn't go to Glenfield College, did you?
I didn't go to Glenfield College, but my stepbrother went to Glenfield College. So I actually grew up in Northland.
Yes.
And then I spent a couple of years at Auckland Girls Grammar in my 6th and 7th form year, and then joined the ASB straight out of school, essentially, after 7th form.
And then it's just been
amazing. Up
and to the left. No, up and to the right. Up and to the left would be straight up. Up and to the right. I'm buying that chart. I went to Northcote College, and we always used to have a rivalry with Glenfield College.
Oh, did you? Yeah. In fact, I think my stepsister used to go to Northcote College.
Oh, good.
Possibly 1 or 2 years
She's
older
clearly very intelligent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I remember our principal from Northcote eventually went to be principal of Glenfield. It caused quite the commotion.
Oh, okay. Controversial. That's like the principal of Auckland Grammar heading across to Kings.
Yes, correct. Can't do it.
Outrageous.
Principal wars. So the mindset shift in our 40s, let's start with that. When moving into this kind of stage of your life, what should, and we can talk about it in terms of, either ourselves or clients that your teams are working with. What sort of shift mentally comes with that change?
Well, in your 40s, your perspective naturally begins to shift, because I think up until now, it's likely been about creating a bit of growth, getting ahead, building your wealth, building your family, maybe recovering from some earlier missteps even. And I think this decade is where many of us start to feel time in a different way. So, retirement starts to come into focus, and, it's not as far off as perhaps you might like it to be, be honest.
Yeah.
But it's really something you have to plan toward. It's a really great time to pause and ask, have I got an investment strategy? Is my investing approach still fit for purpose? Not in a really panicked way, because you've still got time So I don't want anyone to think, oh, it's game over if you haven't kind of started or if you haven't really been reflecting on that. But you do need to get a bit more curious. You need to get a bit more clarity. And I think it's a really pivotal time to be looking at your physical health and your relationships as well, because this is also a time when people, start to become more aware about the well-being and how serious that is, and how do you want to feel in retirement age? How do you want to be living your life? Are you doing all the right things and investing in those other really important elements of life so that you can, if you are saving money and investing money, you can enjoy that in those later years.
And so we normally talk about if we look at it like a triangle, we normally talk about the saving or investing part, but you've just raised some good points. So it's for you personally, and potentially what you're seeing with clients, investing in the relationship and health are just as critical?
Oh, 100%. What I think is really heartbreaking is when you see clients who have worked hard all their lives, they've actually done all the right things in terms of trying to get prepared for this wonderful retirement.
The financial side,
The financial side of things, work really hard, but maybe they've neglected to look after their physical well-being, or maybe they've been working so hard they haven't really nurtured the
other legs of the table. Or
it is about every single one of those legs is critical to balancing that table. And so I think want to have an ideal retirement lifestyle, or just to be aging gracefully and successfully, you do need to be mindful of how you are physically and those connections and relationships around you. I mean, I think you've possibly talked about this previously, about loneliness is one of the biggest health issues as you get older. So there's no point having lots of money in the bank if you've got nobody to enjoy it with, or no other interests and passions, etc. So I think all of those things are quite important.
So it sounds like, I thought we were going to, for this conversation, we're probably going to centre more on the, that first kind of, the investing, the building the wealth part. But, you've raised some really good points that it's broader than that. So, what stands out, it's all about balance and not neglecting one part. Do you see, and I guess from an investment strategy point of view, not being too conservative or too risky, maybe that's the same for your health and your relationship, your family stuff. But, do you see, what should investors or clients be thinking about taking risk, or unnecessary risks in this time?
So I think one of the biggest mistakes that we see is people becoming too conservative too early.
Okay. Is that in the 40s or across the board?
I think so, yeah. 40s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
In reality, if you are looking after yourself, because you've looked after your health, because you've got these great relationships, you could reasonably expect to live for another 20, 30, 40 years after retirement. So if you retire at 65, why wouldn't you still be living at 100? So if you go too conservative too early, you're not really creating that growth opportunity for yourself, and therefore, you could be either missing out on returns. So your 40s are still really a time to focus on growth, especially in those sort of early to mid years, and getting more comfortable with that, because, as we've said, retirement could last 30 years or more, and you really need your investments to be working for you right up until you're here no longer. And yes, that might mean they look a little different. You start to swap out different asset classes. You do tend to get a bit more conservative over time, but as you sort of get more mature. But, your 40s, 50s, 60s, they may not be those decades that you need to go, ultra conservative.
Yeah. And so it's kind of what you're describing there. Is it extending the window? It's not sort of, the window isn't just like, mid 40s to 65. It's actually mid 40s to 50 for 80 years. So you don't have to maybe, is what we're saying, you don't have to maybe chase something to get it all done by 65.
Oh, 100%. That's exactly right. So I think, giving yourself a bit more runway, as you get closer to the retirement age, it is time to start layering in some income producing assets.
Yep.
Particularly if you don't just want to rely on government superannuation.
Yep.
And, who really knows if in 10, 20, 30 years that's going to be available. So, you do start to have a look at dividends and bonds or property income, and preparing for those future drawdowns, which is obviously why we have financial advisors at ASB. They're going to help our clients to make those decisions, help them to guide them through those kind of, those those really interesting decades where you're having to determine, what do I need, what do I want in the future. Some of that planning is actually really difficult to do on your own.
And our old friend John Smith, who's left us, he's left working here. He hasn't left Auckland or anything. But he always talked about that paycheck, and you described that,
100%.
making sure you got your paycheck after you stopped working that you had before. So some of the biggest mistakes people can make that you and your team see in their 40s. We've obviously talked about getting too conservative too early, but I want to go to, you talked about not having a plan at all. I guess folks might, let their retirement just coast into it. But, do you think, is a plan critical rather than the perfect plan?
Yeah, I think you bang on, because you need to start with a vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to ask yourself, what kind of retirement do I want to enjoy? What will I be doing in retirement? For some, it's going to be about travel and experiences. And then for others, it's about spending time with their whānau, their friends, enjoying more freedom day to day. I think in your retirement, you'll be focused on the gardening.
That's right.
Like John, he'll
Yes.
be focused on his horses and
Yes.
the farm.
Yeah.
You kind of need to say, what's that future state? And then just start reverse engineering from there. And that's where the planning phase is really important. That's what I love about what we do at ASB, because that's our real point of difference. We have a very comprehensive planning service.
Yeah.
Which, for a lot of clients, they've never really sat down and had to think deeply about this.
And does that planning service help work out what is my goal or dream, as opposed, because I imagine some people go, well, I don't know how much I need, and they could think that the plan is about just getting to a total, and then I know how much I use of that total each year. Is it as much about helping to sort of elicit out what that goal could be?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's about putting things into buckets and sort of going, okay, so I've got bucket one, which is going to be my cash, conservative assets. It's for the next couple of years of living costs. And that's going to ensure that whatever sort of little incidentals come up, I've got enough money for that. And then you might have another bucket, which is looking at sort of the medium term, what do you need to finance in the next sort of 5 years or so, making sure that you've got money in the right sort of asset class to protect against inflation, but also still allow you some growth, etc. And then that long-term approach as well, looking at, what can you afford to put into growth assets, and what's that going to do for you in your 70s and your 80s. Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about, I know we're not investment strategists, but we'll talk a little bit about income versus growth assets. But one thing, you share client stories with us, right? The people you've helped, just in terms of knowing the impact we're making. But a lot of the times I see things where you've and the team have positioned it about it's allowing so-and-so to have a trip each year, leave a legacy. Mm-hmm. That must be really powerful to help, for clients to be able to see, I can do some of these things that I think I can't because I'm worried about just the paycheck part.
Yeah,
is that when you make it that concrete, does it help?
Well, I think we see lots of different customers with lots of different money personalities.
Yep.
So, we see clients who actually, they're really reluctant to spend, but they've done a great job of accumulating wealth and growing their wealth, but they found it really difficult to kind of then take the step of
enjoying it.
Yeah. And so, there's partly that, to your point, like being able to illustrate and really clearly demonstrate that you're going to be okay. You can afford to do these things. Like in an ideal world, if money wasn't an issue at all, what would you love to be doing? And sort of then bringing that to life for them. And then there's others who are the exact opposite. They're living lifestyles they can't afford. So it's also being able to put some disciplines around that. Yeah.
And so, because we often hear about the former, but your team is helping ones that want to sort of just get on.
High income earners, for example, and we talk about lifestyle creep when we're having a chat about that.
Yeah.
The more you earn, the more you spend. So actually kind of getting some sort of awareness of the fact that it's all very well, YOLO, yes, you only live once, and who knows how long we're here for, so enjoy yourself. But actually also think about your future self and what's the lifestyle that you're going to want, in 20 years, and making sure that you're sort of carving out a little bit there. And, with that budgeting side of things, I think that awareness is really critical, and then the accountability to yourself. And there's lots of options that we've got to save incrementally.
And so your team, so it's, that balance between income and growth, and those terms might not be known to, all savers and investors. Income assets, things like bonds, fixed income. We talk about it on the show quite a lot. Growth assets, equities, stocks, whatever you want to call it. So your team, help us or help clients work out what the balance should be, correct? There's no one size fits all, but your team help work out what my balance should be and when, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really critical part of their role. It's really important that we get to know a client and so, sort of working through those retirement goals or, the lifestyle goals is really critical because that's going to determine what type of asset allocation is suitable for that client. Mm-hmm. So it all goes back to the planning. It all goes back to knowing your client, building the relationship, having the trust and the confidence that they can open up and be really clear about what they need. So that takes a special kind of person and sort of relationship to be able to do that effectively.
Yeah. And so if we talk about retirement, I guess as a concept for those in their 40s, it might be it might feel far away still, but it's kind of, it's only going one way. It's getting closer and closer. If, drawing down, planning for that, do you guys help and your team help people in their 40s start to think about that transition from building the lump sum to drawing it down and using it?
We do, and I'm not sure that would sort of happen in the 40s. It can do. It depends on each individual situation. So I think, what we like to look at is sort of a gradual rebalancing depending on where a client's at, like a seesaw.
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yep. In your early 40s, you might be tilted towards the growth assets and really, still growing your wealth. By your late 50s, though, you might be thinking about income and stability.
And that depends on you, though, doesn't it? So,
it really does.
Yeah.
It really does. And of course, as per any sort of investment discussion, you have to be very cognizant of somebody's risk tolerance. Where are they at in terms of their understanding of what they're investing in? Warren Buffett talks about, he won't invest in anything that he doesn't understand, and sort of, I think that's actually quite a nice philosophy. We spend a lot of time on education, whether that's one-on-one with clients or if that's through events and, webinars and things like that, obviously the podcast, because, that knowledge can then lead to really good actions and really good decisions.
So you've talked with clients, I guess you've described how we're sort of helping clients with sort of the key, I'd say almost stereotypical questions, how much do I need, what goal, what are my dreams, hopes, aspirations, how can I afford them and things. Are there any other curly or, consistent questions that clients might be raising, when they're sitting down with your team members? Like any other, these are key things on my mind. Do you guys have a view on them?
I think one thing we haven't really touched on is the legacy side of things. So clients who want to leave money and, sort of in a philanthropic sense or to look after their children, their grandchildren.
The inheritance issue.
The inheritance, just ensuring that what they've created and that wealth that they've generated actually goes into projects or people that they're really passionate about.
Sure.
So that is a part of the job, which, our people really love. That's some tough conversations because, it is very much future thinking, forward thinking about, when you're gone, it's sort of like planting the acorn and
you're
never
going
to see the tree. That's right. So we work with organisations like Auckland Foundation that, have the ability to kind of source charities and philanthropic endeavours that our clients can support, which might align with their values and their passions. But we also spend a lot of time thinking about, what is the transition of wealth for them and their children?
Yeah, sure.
And, what's the plan? And we have a lot of customers who actually want to start to kind of drip feed some funds now to really support them and set them up while they're still alive, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
And, in a country like New Zealand where it is extremely expensive to buy property relative to income, those types of gifts are actually really important and can make such a difference in the financial well-being of their kids. So those are the sorts of conversations that are really important to clients, but also that we need to facilitate in a meaningful way. And also actually coaching and educating children on investing as well. So they don't need to spend that money. A lot of people want to continue to, I think, nurture and protect for future generations.
Yep.
And, so that could be about just, what do they need to do in the event that they do receive an inheritance? How do they protect that money? How do they continue to help it to grow and to
So
create that
in a
legacy.
nutshell, those are questions we're fielding, and we're helping clients with them. And I guess if they're on top of mind for someone listening, there is an outlet for them to have conversations with people. Yeah,
absolutely.
So if we turn our minds now to risk a bit more, it's a very important factor for any aged investor, core tenet of investing. How do you think people should think in their 40s about risk?
I think managing risk in your 40s is about knowing your goals and your timeline and your temperament.
Okay.
So that's very important, knowing yourself. That's one of the most important things you can kind of spend time on to make sure that you are making good decisions for you. Most people still need a decent chunk in shares or growth assets, but it does really need to feel right for the individual.
Sure, yeah. And we were recording something the other day, you and me, where we talked about you're always going to get exposed to some sort of risk.
Absolutely.
It's just when you take it, right?
Exactly. So there's risk in having all of your money in just cash or term deposits.
Sure.
You are missing out. There's an opportunity cost there.
Yeah.
Likewise, if you've got everything in shares, you're taking on. Is it a risk that you're prepared to take?
Sure.
Do you understand the risk that you're taking? I think everybody, there's risks to all things in investing. It's just knowing your tolerance for the different asset classes and how they can maneuver, and some are more volatile than others. Can you deal with that?
But almost like making no decision and under mattress or putting a head in sand is a risk in and of itself.
It's a significant risk.
Yeah,
that's one thing that I'm really passionate about is trying to educate people to sort of get much more comfortable with the notion that you've got options. You've got to be able to move beyond those fears of, institutions, whatever it is that prevents you from actually creating really good financial well-being for yourself. So that's why I think sitting down with an advisor is really important, because if you find someone that you can relate to connect with, anybody who's a registered financial advisor in New Zealand has to be qualified.
Sure.
So they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So it is really important to find and develop those relationships.
One thing that we always get, not necessarily questions here, but sort of outside, is how do you balance, for someone in their 40s, it's a really, it's all on, right? That stage, you've got everything flowing.
It's like the sandwich generation.
But how do you balancing the mortgage, if you're lucky enough to have gotten to a property, versus investing? I guess obviously we're not giving advice here, but what are the key things, if they are asking of your guys, what are the key questions you're getting asked on that, and how do we help, or can we help on that decision?
Yeah, ideally by the time you reach retirement age, you are mortgage free. So if you are fortunate enough to be a property owner, then yes, that would be a very worthwhile goal.
Yeah.
But if your interest rate's low, and your investments are doing well, you might split your focus. So you could be paying extra on your mortgage while also boosting your savings.
Sure.
There are lots of different vehicles these days to enable you to do both.
Mm-hmm.
KiwiSaver is a great example of that.
Yep.
Tuck it away, and we've got an increase to the compulsory contribution rate coming up next year. That money compounded over time is going to make a material difference to people in retirement. There's just no doubt about it, particularly if you are younger. So if you're 20s, 30s, 40s, you've got a lot of time. So I think, life does throw you curveballs. There's illness, there's job changes, there's kids, there's, parents. There's a lot of costs in your 40s that you need to be mindful of. But if you can carve out a little bit here to, either to pay extra on your mortgage or to be putting some more money aside.
Or balance and do both if you
and
can.
Doing both, ideally, and on top of that, you need an emergency fund, actually. Saying.
Well, emergency fund is what? Is just for like a sudden something?
Yeah, exactly. It's the car breaking down. It's the dental bill that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
It's, the school fees that have gone up again. Those
Shout
sorts
out
of
to
things.
The schools.
Yeah. Those are the sorts of things that can really put people on the back foot.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
And I would just say now we are grossly underinsured as a nation as well. And we're talking about lots of outlays of money here, but insurance is really critical too. So that's a very, very important part of your financial plan, making sure, your income's covered, your life is covered.
Yeah.
Those essential things, your main assets.
So I guess it's those buffers that you're describing there, providing you can, and if you can, get them in place. is it correct that, or you guys see that as critical? If you have that in place, it helps the other legs of the stool, the family.
Exactly right. Because those emergencies
health.
are the things that can really, as I say, put you back decades. You could have been working super hard, doing all the right things.
Yeah.
And then it just takes one sort of something to come out of left field and, that changes the game. So ideally, you put all those plans in place so that when those times, which are inevitable, we're all going to be impacted by the unexpected kind of disasters.
It cushions it.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And so for final piece of guidance for someone in their 40s, if there's anyone who's in their 40s in the room we're recording here, there might be, maybe, who knows, what's the sort of guidance whether that's personal from your personal perspective or, I guess from the team at ASB, the key messages and guidance that's true to that group?
So my advice would be to start now. If you haven't already started that kind of planning and thinking for the long term, then, today's a good day to do that. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Your 40s are a powerful time to pause and reflect and to really kind of realign with what matters to you. You've got half a clue at this stage of life. And as I kind of touched on, that investing isn't just about the money. It's also about investing in all of the things that make life good. And, you start to become a bit more aware of your mortality at this age in this decade. So take care of your health, nurture your relationships.
Yeah.
Be good with your money.
Yeah.
It's a finite resource.
And as I guess, sometimes I think, we talk about that advice point often, the best time to start is yesterday or the best time, second best time is today. And sometimes people go, I hear that all the time, but it really is that. And just start.
Oh, just start. Because, a year just flies by.
Yeah.
And next thing you've got a little nest egg that you never had before.
Yeah, you got your buffer.
You got your wee buffer. You got your emergency fund. So, yeah.
And, I mean, this wonderful conversation. To our final question now, and I know we've got, we're both feeding on it. We ask all our guests, what's something you've been reading, listening to, watching, or doing that you can recommend to our listeners? They don't have to be in their 40s.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm a bit of a podcast junkie and I do a lot of travelling for work. I live in Whangarei and I am in Auckland weekly and around the country. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks too. And I was just thinking of rattling off a few and they're quite sort of broad, actually.
Diversified portfolio.
That's right. Of books and podcasts. So I'm reading at the moment a book called Only Love Today.
Oh, okay.
Which is all about focusing on the good and making sure that you are putting things in perspective and being as loving and caring as you can be, which I think as a parent is really good sage advice. And then the 5 types of wealth. So that's also looking about more broadly, and maybe this is, we can hear it through my kind of commentary, is that,
clear.
It's not just about the money. Okay. So, you've got to really think about what's the kind of life you want to lead and how do you move through life? Is it unencumbered physically and mentally and emotionally and all of those things? So that's really cool. And one that I'm finding kind of very intellectually stimulating is Super Agency, which is all about AI. And that's pretty technical and
gosh, you are well read.
Well, I wouldn't say that, to be honest.
Well listened, is it?
Oh, yeah. But there's another book.
Yeah, go for it.
See, I've got them all on the go. It depends on how I'm feeling. There's another book, Surrounded by Idiots. Now, the title would suggest that,
present company excluded.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
It's actually about awareness, self-awareness and understanding other personalities. So stop thinking that, everybody else is kind of
an idiot. Yeah, right, to get you, just different people.
To get you, that's right, different people, different perspectives. So that's always really good, particularly when you're in a leadership position and you're dealing with lots of different types of personalities every day.
Yeah.
Again, good perspective.
God, 4 for the price of 1. I really enjoyed that. My one this episode was I did an EFT course with my beloved wife the other week. And EFT stands for Emotionally Focused Therapy. That's what she does for a profession. So we had the chance to go along and do one to see, kind of see what it's all about. So when she recommends it to clients, I was, as could be predicted, I was grumpy at first about doing it. Anything your partner makes you do, you're always grumpy. 9 to 5, Saturday and Sunday it was on a wet Auckland weekend. But honestly, I mean, it's on point for kind of what we've been talking about. It was an awesome way to connect and take time out from your busy 40s life stage that you're in. You just get caught up in doing everything else, except maybe looking inward. So a useful way of looking at things. And it's one thing that stood out to me was it's often, couples might argue, we don't, but, couples may argue about money, for instance, right? Or saving, or, we're not saving enough. But the teachers, practitioners, leaders of that were saying it's often that's not the issue. Often it's another underlying issue that you just need to talk through, and they just are symptoms of an underlying thing. So, when you focus on that, you can, and repair that, it can set up, all the other things can go away.
Love it.
And spending, saving can all be put in place, so focusing on you as a couple, a relationship, I think is, a really solid foundation for investing. But I would say, the number one kind of thing that you can sort of almost guarantee your success if you still love each other, is to have that amazing communication. Correct.
That will get you through everything. So, and I think it applies in all relationships. So whether it's your romantic partner, your husband, your wife, your whomever, your spouse, your children, but even your bankers, even your wealth managers, seriously, to be able to communicate openly and to really truly understand each other. That's where that's where the gold is.
And so, well, thank you for coming on. I love the conversation. I know you're very busy, but thank you for being here and to help our listeners with this difficult area of investing and life. I'd say, whether you're in your 40s yet or not, it's a challenging but fun and rewarding period. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Oh, thanks so much, Nigel. I actually did in the end. So, I'm a wee bit nervous.
You're allowed to be nervous. It's a podcast. It's all right. But you will be hearing more from Ngaire. She'll be coming back, I'm sure. So, to wrap up, on reflection, I guess, some people might listen to this conversation and think, I don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff because it's not investing. But I think what's clear to me is you can be a better saver, let alone investor, if you've got a solid platform behind you. If your life is sorted, health, relationship, wider family, it probably makes you a better investor, right?
Yeah, and look, I just think in general, if you are looking after yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, you're going to be more inclined to do the right thing for your future self. For
your finances,
Yes, and looking after your finances and making some of those sacrifices now for the future you is going to be really important.
Well, I don't even need to wrap up this podcast. It's been said better than I could ever say. And so with that, until next time, happy chatting as a couple, as a family, or whatever it is. Happy communication, happy investing, and it's bye for now. Thanks for listening to the ASB Investment Podcast. If you have any thoughts on this episode, or if there's anything you'd like us to discuss on a future show, get in touch with us at podcasts@asb.co.nz.